Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling, and I'm your host. Sean Fraser and MP Haju were brought in front of the Indigenous Committee, the First Nations Committee, to answer questions about why the housing is so poor. I mean, again, they've done nothing. They've talked and talked and talked, and then they've moved the dates, and they've done absolutely nothing. And it's funny because the second that Sean Fraser gets asked those questions, or because in this instance they didn't speak to MP Haju, probably because they just talked to her last week and they know that she's got nothing to offer. I don't know that, but I'm just saying that's my guess. So Sean Fraser was there, and what I like is how the chair sort of ran a block on the Liberals' tactic of just talking about random things, all about blaming somebody else for all of their shortcomings, how they've been in power for 10 years, but yet somehow it's still the prior government's fault. It's 10 years. People become doctors in less time. Anyway, before we get into it, I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, smash the like button. So let's listen to this, and then I'll tell you what I find really funny. But it's a little bit longer one as a result. So,
Mr. Fraser, you just mentioned about your desire to keep doing more. However, this is the fourth Auditor General report on Indigenous housing, and yet there has been little to no improvement, according to her report. Where are the homes you promised?
So there are tens of thousands of homes that have been built or repaired since we formed government through the programs that we've advanced. I would accept the recommendations of the Auditor General, which don't remain uniform as between reports. And in fact, one of the reasons that it's essential we maintain that position is so that we can have continued assessment of where we at vis-a-vis where we need to be. So the specific homes that you're asking about would depend on each community. There's members represented here who have homes in their communities today that did not exist a number of years ago, and we need to accelerate the pace of that delivery.
So according to the report here, 55,320 housing units are needed to be built now until 2030 to keep on track. However, from 2018 to now, only 4,379, or 8% of the units have been completed, 13% are in progress, and 79% are still needed. So again, Minister,
so as I mentioned, it will depend on which community you're talking about. We need to increase the pace of construction, and there's some irony in the question coming from a member whose party has a history of not making investments in housing in Indigenous communities.
Minister, according to the Auditor General, there has been little to no improvement in the last four Auditor General reports, and last time I checked, you've been here for 9 years, and yet we are still dealing with the same problem. So again, where are the homes?
With respect, over those 9 years, every time there was an opportunity to support or vote for more investments in housing for Indigenous communities, you have voted against them. It's ironic for you to sit here and pretend to be a champion for Indigenous housing when your voting history has gone in the opposite direction.
It still does not let you off the hook for the past 9 years. Where are the homes?
There are tens of thousands of homes that have been added to the housing supply in Indigenous communities as a result of the investments we've made. Do we need to do more?
So
yes, absolutely.
Says little to nothing has changed. So you keep saying you have to do more, and it seems the track record of this government is to spend money and use that as their talking point, but outcomes have not been changing, and that's the thing we should be actually focusing on.
So I agree that we should be focusing on outcomes, but when I compare outcomes of tens of thousands of new homes existing compared to the 99 new homes that were built while your leader was the housing minister, it's clear there is no contest. Moreover, it's not reasonable for a Conservative MP to show up this committee and ask to do more on Indigenous housing when you have voted against money for Indigenous housing at every opportunity.
Well, you and your government have said Indigenous communities are the most important relationship. However, little to nothing has changed on the housing file. This is still substandard housing in many communities, and you're not even on track to meet the goals that you say you want to achieve. So again, what are you doing differently? You say you need to do more. Well, clearly nothing much has changed in the last 9 years. What is the more?
The more is
Par plus, j'entends l'investissement de ressources importantes dans la construction de logements pour les collectivités autochtones et aussi autonomiser ces communautés pour qu'elles décident comment cet investissement s'articule dans le concret. Ça, c'était pas du tout là dans la plateforme conservatrice. Nous, on va de l'avant avec un changement.
Hold on.
I would like to just point out that no matter all of the tactics that Sean Fraser is trying to deflect, right? It's never their fault. And if you think in your mind that there are 600 bands represented in this table, And he is still trying to pass the buck off to somebody else after almost 10 years of doing absolutely nothing, sitting on their hands. Imagine if it was just you trying to get solved. They would lock the door and forget you existed. They would just simply turn their back on you and walk away. They would never, ever, ever, ever deign to speak to you. They're only here because there's so many First Nations bans. And even so, they're still saying it's not their fault. So I just wonder, where is the term responsible applied to these guys in responsible government? All right, let's back to it.
You can continue your time. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. And Minister, it was the Residential Construction Council of Ontario that said there was no way the feds would meet their housing targets. So again, where are the homes you promised? 79% of units are still needed.
Mr. Chair, it's only been a few minutes and we've already seen the Conservative member move off the issue of Indigenous housing, much like they did while they had the opportunity to make investments and chose not to.
Well, I figure you're not going to answer the question, so I might as well try another topic.
We're here on a study to tackle the housing needs.
Chair, it's my time. Can I reclaim that time, please, Chair?
So you have your time. You still have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So again, maybe we'll focus on the actual question I just asked. The Residential Construction Council of Ontario said there was no way the federal government would meet their housing targets. So again, where are the homes?
Mr. Chair, I have 2 points in response. First of all, we've been at this committee for about 3 minutes now, and the Conservatives have already changed the subject from Indigenous housing, much as they avoided it while they were last in office.
Chair.
Second, and he keeps interrupting to ruin the audio because he's embarrassed of the answer here, and he should be embarrassed because, Mr. Chair, do I have the floor? I want to respect the interpreter, but this is inappropriate.
Order, please.
Now all of a sudden it's the interpreter he wants to respect. He doesn't have any problem interrupting you until he knows he's getting his butt kicked. And this is what the Liberals have been doing for the last 2 weeks. Oh, the interpreters. But in reality, they know they got not a leg to stand on. He talks about how MP Schmally mentioned what the housing, the guy talked about how the Minister Fraser is never going to hit his targets. But yet when he was asked about Indigenous housing, all he did was talk about the Conservatives. So he didn't answer the question. So MP Schmally switched to talk about maybe he'll answer those questions. Of course, he's not answering those questions because he doesn't have an answer, because he knows he's a complete and utter failure at solving these problems.
Thank you very much. Again.
Oh, I should mention, they're giving him, MP Schmally, back his clock. They're not taking the minutes away, because they know that the Liberals are trying this tactic to run up the clock. And so he says, let me reclaim my time. And he says, yeah, your clock is still the same.
Rent has doubled. Housing has doubled. Housing costs have doubled. Food bank usage is at record highs. Minister, we're talking about housing that, by all accounts, many of the people actually building housing say your government has no plan and will not reach your target. So again, it's a simple question, Minister. Where are the housing? Where are the houses?
Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, rather, now that I have the floor, I trust I can make this point without interruption.
Sean Fraser.
This is a study about the housing needs of Indigenous communities across this country. It has been a few minutes, and the Conservatives are now resorting to reading questions off their phone, off topic, because they feel like they can't have a serious conversation about this issue. There was years where they had the opportunity to make the investments and chose not to. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm being spoken over. Every time I make this argument, he talks over me. Do I have the floor?
I'm not going to let him take my time,
Mr. Chair, do I have the floor?
You have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, with respect to my friend and colleague, he had many years as his party in office to make investments or not make investments in Indigenous housing. They chose not to. Now he has an opportunity to ask questions about it, and instead he's looking at his phone to ask questions he's reading from the leader's office rather than actually engaging on the issue of housing in Indigenous communities. It's inappropriate.
Well, Chair,
with respect,
again,
he says we have no plan, and again, he's talking over. He's very uncomfortable with this argument. He says we have no plan.
Mr.
Chair, do I have the floor?
Chair, I want to reclaim my time.
Mr. Chair, do I have the floor?
30 seconds.
Do I have the floor?
This is not answering my question. He doesn't get to
Mr. Chair, sorry, there's been no point of order. Do I have the floor?
You do have the floor.
Thank you. I have respected my colleague while he was speaking. I would appreciate if he would return the professional courtesy. He suggested we don't have a plan. We literally published a plan in April of this year. He may think it's foreign because the plan that he put forward as a party has no measures in it that will actually build more homes. With respect, we have...
Order.
He's just trying to run out the clock.
Mr. Shields.
I would suggest that the member, Mr. Smale, be able to ask his question. It's his time. And the minister is going on and talking about other
nonsense.
things. So
Nonsense.
he needs
Nothing
to be able to
related to the
reclaim
question.
his
Absolutely nothing
time
related
be
to
able
the
speak
question.
and ask questions.
Because he's embarrassed. He should be ashamed of himself, the way he's leaving people to build tent houses, the way that he doesn't want to understand it. Anyway, ashamed of himself.
So, Mr. Smale, you still have, I'll give you one more question, okay?
Thank you very much. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity. Again, we are not seeing your targets met on for non-First Nations, for Indigenous communities, and across the country. There have been no targets being met. You're not on track anywhere in this country to meet your housing targets. You say you have to do more, fine, but the last 4 Auditor General's report said nothing has changed. So I want to know specifically what is going to change.
It's a good question.
So first, with respect to the issue of targets, the targets outlined in the National Housing Strategy under our bilateral agreements and affordable housing investments have delivered more units than were set out as a goal at the outset. But we need to do more, as I've mentioned repeatedly, and we have broadcasted a series of measures in the recent housing plan that are going to increase the investments. The Conservatives seem to struggle with the idea that you should set a target that's going to solve a problem, not one that your measures are going to lead to anyway. A final comment, because I expect I'm going to run out of time. During the last exchange, I should point out when one of the members said something about what I was talking about. The questioner has said it was nonsense. Investments in housing for Indigenous peoples in this country is not nonsense. It may appear that way given the questions today and the history of the Conservative Party, but for the record, the government takes a different view.
Here we go, right? What a load of malarkey. Do you know what he said there? He said absolutely nothing. He said, yeah, well, the targets that we set out originally in 2018 have almost been met. And the Conservatives seem to have a hard time understanding that when you almost meet those targets, you're actually leading to a pathway for further down the road. You know what I mean? They're gearing it up or getting it ready. And, oh, I am so offended that the guy told me that, you know, my time had to be reclaimed and that it, and he just blah, 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 blah. But at no time, the question was repeated, what, 4 or 5 times? Where are the houses? Where are the houses? Where are they? And what I do know is that what I'm telling you right now, I have seen some top-tiered BS artists in my life. When they don't answer directly, that's because they don't have, either they know the answer is going to make them look bad or they don't have the answer. When especially this Liberal Party, when they have an answer, they scream it from the top of their lungs. Otherwise, somehow in their mind, they think you and I are so dense that we don't understand that they have had the reins of power for nearly a decade, but somehow in our minds, it's still the Conservatives' fault. And one other thing when he talks about the vote, because like I told you, it was a little bit longer. It doesn't matter how the Conservatives vote because Jagmeet Singh will always pass the Liberals' plans. So it doesn't matter what the Conservatives do. And I would point out that the Conservatives voted against what appears to be a bad plan because it has yet to produce results. So it seems to me that the Conservatives were looking out for not only us, but the First Nations as well. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, subscribe, share this channel with your friends. I'll talk to you next time.